let's move on to Sabstian Kocar, next presenter. It's from the Institute for Social Change in the College of Arts, Law and Education.
Okay, thank you. So this early morning, Paul and I will present our paper titled, Why Do People Say They Participate in Online Panel Surveys? And this time we are expanding our research on motivations to participate in online panels to volunteer panels. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. First, we have to acknowledge 3 organizations that supported this research: the Australian National University, the Social Research Centre, and the University of Tasmania, all 3 from Australia. And we also have to thank survey participants from Life in Australia and the Tasmania project panel. In this presentation, I will first outline the study and its objectives. Then Paul will present methods, the results based on quantitative data, and the results of our content analysis. I will then present the results for a non-commercial volunteer online panel and finish the presentation by summarizing key findings and practical implications of this research. The main aim of this project was to understand why people participate in probability-based online panel research and to potentially identify some practical solutions for online panels for organizations managing online panels. And that is why, as part of this initial study, we also wanted to establish a connection between the reported motivations and persuasive communications in recruitment materials. And later we expanded this research to non-commercial volunteer online panels with an objective to establish a relationship between motivations to participate in online panels and social demographic characteristics of their panelists. This was a mixed method study, and we're going to present 3 components of this project in this particular talk. In Life in Australia and the Tasmania project survey, exactly the same open-ended question was asked panelists, and it was about their motivations to participate in panel surveys. Life in Australia panelists participated in 2019, and the Tasmania project survey respondents in 2022, so this year. Maybe I should mention that, the Tasmania project is managed by the University of Tasmania, and it has been active and gradually recruited since April 2020, primarily to measure the impact of COVID-19 on Tasmanians. The basic idea was to give everybody interested a voice. Paul and I also content analyzed Life in Australia recruitment communication, and he will now provide more details. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Sabstian. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. As Sabstian said, one of the studies that we did used data from the Social Research Centre panel, Life in Australia, same panel that Dina spoke about earlier in this session. And as you noted, that's a national panel representative, a probability sample representative of the Australian country. Most of the data is collected online, but there are some offline panelists that provide their data to interviewers via telephone. And this is the question, I'll let you read it here. This is the question that was asked in June of 2019 in wave 28 of that panel. There were approximately 2,000 panelists who completed this question, and nearly 75% of them, a little more than 75%, gave permission for researchers outside, in the sense of the Social Research Centre, to use the data for research purposes such as this. Of those 1,500 plus, Sabstian and I worked together to code them into quantitative data so that we could do quantitative analyses. And if you pass on to the next slide, please, Sabstian. Next slide, please.
I'm trying to.
Oh.
I don't know. There's something wrong with these slides. I don't know. I can't really move it. Is somebody else controlling it?
Can you click on the slide first and then sometimes that seems to motivate it.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you. So we started out this quantitative coding by each of us sampling 100 open-ended verbatims and coming up with our own coding system that we thought was applicable. And then we met together and found that our respective systems were very similar. And we agreed to a final set of 18 codes to apply to the verbatims that the panelists wrote down. Throughout our process, we used various reliability checks to make sure that we were coming up with consistency between the two of them. And ultimately, we established 16 different variables that we created out of the coding. They were yes/no variables to indicate whether the substantive codes were mentioned by someone or not mentioned. And for each panelist, we coded as many as 3 motivations that she or he may have stated. Next slide, please. So in addition to that, as Sabstian mentioned, we requested all the communication materials that the Social Research Center had used with these panelists. And there were 14 different types of communications that were used with them to either recruit them initially into the panel or to keep them active while they were in the panel. So some of these materials we use multiple times with any one panelist, depending on how consistent the panelist was in completing waves. So independent of us, of each other, we read all of these scripts, and we came up with the motivational themes that we thought were being created or were conveyed via the scripts. Once again, we compared our work. We found that it was very closely related, and we settled on a certain number of themes. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the 18 different codes or motivations that we identified for the panelists themselves. That's on the right side of this, and at the far right, you see a percentage of the times one of these motivations was articulated by a panelist. You can see that the motivation to experience some form of self-actualization, to allow my voice to be heard, was the most frequently stated reason for joining the Life in Australia panel. We also, on the left side, you'll see we did a principal component analysis, and we found that all of the motivations were associated with these 8 components. We can go to the next one, please. This is the first of 2 slides, and on the right side, you see what did the panelists report, and then we match those to the themes that we found in the communications from the Social Research Center to the panelists. So you can see here that motivation 1, sharing your views to make a difference, motivation 14, contributing to survey science and so forth. We matched it up with this theme of you can influence Australian researchers, policymakers, and academics. And if you turn to the next one, please. And this is then the additional 9 different themes that we found in there and matched up against their respective motivations that the panelists mentioned. Of interest to us is that the panelists in their verbatims identified 6 different motivations that were not associated with any of the themes that were in the communication materials being used by the Social Research Center. And so we recommended to the Social Research Center that they consider to work these additional motivations into their recruitment. Thank you, Sabstian.
So I'll finish this presentation with the results from the volunteer online panel. So for some motivations, we can report little differences between Life in Australia and the Tasmania project survey. such as sharing views, opinions, to make difference or influence change, or to represent others like me, population subgroups, or minorities. However, a notably lower proportion of volunteer panelists participate to have their voice heard, and substantially more panelists wished to contribute to the survey study project. We also identified some new motivations, such as COVID-19 related reasons. And more importantly, we identified a number of differences in motivations between socioeconomic, socio-demographic groups. So far, we looked at gender, age, education, volunteering, and having children, and at 5 of the most common motivations. So we observed little differences for gender and having children, but age and especially education and volunteering were good predictors of motivations to participate in volunteer online panel research. For example, we realized that volunteers are more likely to see survey participation as a form of volunteering, contributing, while females, non-binary, and the least educated were more likely to see online panels as a platform to represent people like them.
Sebastian, 30
study,
seconds. I can only give you 30 more seconds to wrap up, please.
Okay, so there were 4 very interesting findings in this study. I cannot really talk about all of them. So first of all, it was surprising to find out how little value monetary incentives had. So online panels could consider adjusting the incentive protocols. And second of all, the panelists expressed 6 motivations, and those 6 motivations could be added to the Social Research Center recruitment materials in the future. And we identified some new motivations, like COVID-19 motivations. And last but not least, we presented that social demographic variables can explain some variability of motivations to participate. And we wonder if we can generalize to all types of online panels, including probability online panels. Thank you. And sorry for the technical problems.
No problem. Thank you so much.